What's up, Ragin Nation? How's it going? This is Alex Yu, and you're watching the Marvel edition of the Ragin Nation show. This is a web series where we're talking about all things that matter in the world Marvel films. This is episode number 90, and in this episode, I want to talk about the Fantastic Four, and specifically the future of the Fantastic Four franchise. I'm sure that some of you guys have already seen the Fantastic Four reboot, directed by director Josh Trank, and it is full of problems. It's just not a very good film, and a lot of the problems that we see on the big screen is a direct reflection of the problems that went down during the production of this film. This film was a mess to begin with before it ended up being a mess on the big screen. Josh Trank fought with Fox Studios, and Fox Studios fought with Josh Trank, which in itself is a problem because I thought that the studios agreed on what they wanted from Josh Trank. I thought that that was the case, and that's how it works when you sign on a dotted line. Apparently not in this case. So there was a lot of things that went down. For example, script changes before shooting, like last minute script changes, and even script changes during shooting, and just last minute reshoots, and Josh Trank disagreeing with the casting choices and not being happy about it. And there was just so much to the point where I feel that this film is completely plagued. So the studios thought that they were gonna get $45 to $50 million on its opening weekend, which is really quite high. Well, after all that negative publicity, they lowered their expectations to $30 million, but then it ended up with $25 million, which is quite below what they were predicting, making it already a box office flop. It was a definite studio flop, both critically and financially. And, you know, I understand that Fox Studios was watching over Josh Trank's shoulder like a hawk because they gave him $120 million to play with. We're not dealing with Chronicle anymore. Chronicle was made for only $12 million. They gave him that $12 million and they said, go ahead, knock yourself out. And it ended up being a huge financial and critical success. But not this case. In fact, the complete opposite. So, you know what? Before I talk about the future of this franchise, let's just go over some of these little details that were mentioned from the Hollywood Reporter, and I'm just going to comment on it, okay? So, here's the first thing that they mentioned was Trank apparently didn't produce good enough material to ever create a film which could be salvaged and refused to help from the studios and producers. He holed up in a tent and cut himself off from everybody. One insider tells the site he built a black tent around his monitor. He was extremely withdrawn. He would go to his trailer and he wouldn't interact with anybody. That is a problem within itself. If you're not even being communicative with your casting crew, then what are they supposed to think? Obviously, they're going to think that you're difficult to work with, and I'm sure that the producers and even the executive producers would be talking to the studios right now and warning them that, you know what, this isn't going in the right direction. All right. Next, it says, while Fox initially had faith in Trank's vision of a grounded and gritty Fantastic Four movie, it appears as if the filmmaker took that too far as he forced a gloomy tone on the movie by obsessing over the cast performance. During takes, he would be telling cast members when to blink and when to breathe. He kept pushing them to make the performance as flat as possible. Now, I get the whole the whole dark and gritty tone. I appreciate the change in tone, but you don't have to take it that far, okay? I understand they wanted gloomy and somber and really, really dark, but that's just taking it too far. I don't know where Josh Trank is going with this, but it is all wrong, okay? Even like as a director, not just as the direction for the film, but as a director, okay? Your work ethic. You may remember some time ago that Josh Trank and his dogs were accused of causing as much as $100,000 worth of damage to a house which was rented for him in Baton Rouge by Fox after landlord Martin Padial made moves to evict the director. Photographs of the landlord's family that were in the house were defaced. Padial made a complaint to the local sheriff's department and filed a civil suit in Louisiana that is sealed. The sheriff's department says the case was closed as a civil matter between landlord and tenant. How do you go about destroying other people's property when you didn't even pay for it? Fox Studios rented $100,000 place for you to work out of, and then you go about to destroying and defacing other people's property. That's just not right. Before you completely blame Trank on how Fantastic Four turned out, one source says that the movie was always ill-conceived, made for the wrong reasons, and there was no vision behind the property. Fox was terrified of losing the rights to Marvel, and the reboot was in chaos before shooting even started. They were afraid of losing the rights, so they pressed forward and didn't surround Trank with the help or fire him. They buried their heads in the sand. Now, this is a problem in itself. Like it said, it's made for the wrong reasons. They needed to make a film before the expired, or rather, before the rights expired and went back to Marvel, and that is why they have to continue this cycle. If they make this film, they can extend the rights, and that's why they did it. And what we ended up with was a film that was half-assed. It was rushed. When you watch the film, you can feel that nothing really happens because it has a poor script, a script that has been tampered with by the studios, and in the end, the vision was completely all over the place. Okay? I mean, I know we're talking about business, but they let business affect a story, the telling of a story, and in the end, the fans lose. While they initially considered firing Trank, Fox had faith in the director and believed he could be the next J.J. Abrams. However, as it became apparent that he couldn't cope with the movie, it was simply too late to ditch him. How do you ask someone to take over half of a movie shot by somebody else? You either hire somebody desperate for work, or you start over, write off pretty much the whole budget and lose the cast. Fair point. So they felt that this movie was doomed. They, no pun intended, but they felt that the movie was doomed. They felt that there's nothing that could be salvaged. So they decided that, you know what, it's a write-off. We're gonna just tamper with it. I mean, I'm talking from the perspective of Fox. We're gonna go in. We're gonna change the script. We're going to cut off Josh Trank from the production. We're going to kick him out, and we're going to get somebody else to work on it, and we're going to salvage whatever we can out of this film, even if it includes deleting key scenes. Maybe we are just going to shorten this film because originally it had at least 2-hour runtime. With at lower than 2-hour runtime, we can have more screenings of the film during a regular business day at the cinemas, and therefore have more screenings and therefore make more money and just salvage whatever we can. Okay, so that was their move. Those reshoots have been blamed for the poor quality of Fantastic Four, but the movie apparently didn't even have an ending when shooting concluded. Simon Kinberg and Hutch Parker scrambled to come up with something, but Former's busy schedule and the fact that much of the cast was unavailable led to a lot of material was shot with doubles, and the production moved to Los Angeles to film scenes with Teller against a green screen. It was chaos, says a crew member, adding that Trank was still in attendance but was neutralized by a committee. So you can see what happened here, and this is what happened in the final act of the film. That final act was nothing great. It was nothing great at all. It was pretty bland. There was no direction for it. It was just to wrap up the film, and you can tell that this was something that they did to just let's just close it up. Let's just wrap it up. Let's finish it. This movie is a mess, and let's just shoot whatever we can with doubles and put the main actors behind a green screen and just do it. Who cares at this point? So there's a problem. Finally, who was responsible for that terrible ending and second act? Fox reportedly put together a dream team to rescue the movie, and that included Drew Goddard. Whatever he and the rest of that team did obviously failed horribly. At the end of it all, no matter who you put in at the middle of all of this, it is going to be a failure, because the movie was a failure to begin with. They didn't even make the movie for the right reasons, and at the end of the day, you just can't come up with a good product. So I'm going to put the blame on Fox Studios. I'm also going to put the blame on Josh Trank. He was very difficult to work with, and apparently he didn't even want Kate Mara in the film, and because of that, he was being very, very combative and very hostile towards the cast and the crew, and especially her. So that that is something that wasn't very good. As well as he also was okay with having Miles Teller in the film, but then they ended up in almost a fist fight apparently. they almost had a fist fight because of Miles Teller was telling Josh Trank that, you know what, we can't work with this. We can't work like this. These are terrible working conditions. You're giving everybody a hard time, and you're being quite the prick. Okay, so you know what? I'm gonna give it to you. But anyways, so that is the problem, those were the problems that happened with this film. A lot of things went down. And because of that, we ended up with an incomplete film, or rather a failure of a film. So the big question is, what is going to happen to the franchise, the Fantastic Four franchise? I mean, this is a story that needs to be retold again. You know why? Because they need to do this justice. They need to do Marvel's very first superhero team justice. This is a very iconic superhero team with one of the most iconic villains in Marvel history, Doctor Doom. They need to do it right in live action. And if they don't do it right, then they're missing out on an opportunity to create something really, really great, and something great for the fans. Okay? So the big question is, what is going to happen? And well, I'll tell you what is going to happen in these 5 suggestions. Okay? Number 1, give the rights back to Marvel. Essentially give Fantastic Four back to Marvel Studios. Because right now 20th Century Fox has those rights. And well, Marvel Studios, they want them all. They want Spider-Man back in some ways. They kind of do have him, kind of partially, but they also want X-Men and Fantastic Four back so they can rule. And that's what they would love to have. But here's the thing. If Marvel gets the Fantastic Four rights back, then we're not going to see a Fantastic Four film at least until Phase 4, which starts at 2020. Okay, we're not going to see a Fantastic Four film, like a properly done Marvel Studios production Fantastic Four film, until 2020. That's 5 years later, which isn't that long compared to the gap between the last Fantastic Four film, The Rise of the Silver Surfer. That was an 8-year gap. So a 5-year gap, not so bad. But the fact is that 20th Century Fox has no plans to give up those rights at all. Okay, they mentioned that, a studio executive mentioned that they absolutely have no plans to do that, and that they're going to hold on to the rights. After all, they made this film to actually extend the rights, and they're going to do just that. There's actually a petition going on that was created by fans for 20th Century Fox to give the rights back to Marvel, but you can sign it all you want. I don't think it's happening. Okay? Now here's suggestion number 2, and that is for Fox Studios to continue making the sequel as scheduled. Now, they won't be able to make the sequel as scheduled, considering the fact that the sequel that they scheduled for was in summer of 2017. That's 2 years from now. Nobody wants to see another Fox Fantastic Four film at this point, because of what happened. Nobody wants to see that. The fans don't want to see that. Okay? Maybe the studios want to see one, but at least not in 2 years. Okay? So if they want to make that happen, if they want to make a Fantastic Four sequel happen based off of this reboot, then they're going to have to give it some more time. They're going to have to give some more time for fans to forget about it. And then maybe a few years later after that, then they can make one and continue where they left off, which kind of sucks because they already killed off Doctor Doom. Or hopefully maybe he's in the Planet Zero or the Negative Realm. But the fact is that it feels like they've already screwed it up before they can make it better. They've already screwed it up. So that's not a great idea in my opinion. Okay. Suggestion number 3 is give it a few years and then reboot it. Man, this will be the 4th if you include that B movie that came out in the 80s, or 90s, I don't know. But there was this low budget version. I'm not even going to talk about that. But anyways, if they decide to give it a few years and reboot it again, How do you think the Fantastic Four fans, or rather the fans in general, are going to deal with that? They already didn't like the first iteration, which was the Jessica Alba, Chris Evans version. At least it wasn't as great as it could have been. And the sequel didn't do that much better either, okay? Because it didn't make more money than the other one, and it was rated more poor than the previous installment. And then you make this reboot this year in 2015, and nobody seems to be a fan of that either. So what do you think is going to happen if Fox Studios decides to reboot it again after a few years? That bad taste is still left in their mouths. And what they need to see is another studio handling it if they decide they're going to reboot it. If you want to reboot it, hand it over to another studio. Just give it to another studio and then reboot it. Unless we're talking about a 10-year wait, maybe you might have to wait a 12 to 15-year wait so that fans can really forget about this reboot. Because I remember Fantastic Four, the one with Jessica Alba and Chris Evans, like it was yesterday, even though it was 10 years ago. Okay? So, yeah, I don't know if that's a great idea. Number 4. Jump right into the Fantastic Four X-Men crossover. Now, so far, out of the ideas and suggestions that I've mentioned, this seems to be the best one. Make the Fantastic Four background characters. Just make them background characters. Have them in an X-Men film and put them in the background as supporting characters. You know why? Because that way, they can give these characters a reason to be there. You know what I'm saying? So, the X-Men, make the X-Men Fantastic Four crossover film a great film. Make it a really great film. Okay? And that way, they can say that, oh, there's a really great film, and the Fantastic Four are in it. So, you know, that in itself is great. Okay? And then, once the fans have started liking these characters, the Fantastic Four, then move on to that Fantastic Four film because of how great you saw they were in the X-Men and Fantastic Four crossover film. So I think that's a pretty good move, and if they want to do that, they need to get Bryan Singer on board. They gotta make it X-Men Days of Future Past quality storytelling, okay? And if they do that, I think they could put Fantastic Four back on track as being back to one of the better Marvel films. Okay, because it was doomed from the start. They got to put it back on the right track, and I think that this is the best way to do it. Okay, and the 5th suggestion that I have is go to Daredevil route, and that is put it into TV. Make it a TV series. Reboot it, and then have all new actors, and then make the first season all about the origins, and then have these characters properly developed. Make it into a TV series. I'm not a big fan about this idea, but they can do a really good job with this. I'm not a big fan of it because I want to see these characters as part of this big universe that Marvel created, or rather 20th Century Fox created, with all these characters that they own. You know, the X-Men, Deadpool, Gambit, and all the other mutants. If they bring in Fantastic Four into that mix as part of this larger universe, I think that would be pretty cool. So, there you have it. What do you guys think about any of those suggestions? Number 1, give it back to Marvel. Number 2, make the sequel anyways. Number 3, give it a few years and reboot it. Number 4, make the crossover film with X-Men. Or number 5, make it a TV series like Daredevil. Daredevil is, after all, very awesome. And I think they had the right idea by making it a TV series. And I think that with such an epic origins that the Fantastic Four have, I think with a 12 to 13 episode first season, I think you can really flesh out the characters and tell a really engaging story. Alright? So, but anyways, I'm leaning more towards the Bryan Singer directed X-Men Fantastic Four crossover, which most likely isn't going to happen because, after all, Bryan Singer did say that this is only going to happen if Fantastic Four does well. Okay? Which it didn't. So, anyways, so those are my suggestions. The last thing that I want to mention is how to make a good Fantastic Four film. How do you make a really good Fantastic Four film? Let's say they were to reboot it, okay? Start from scratch again and do it right. I think that if there were no problems surrounding this Josh Trank directed reboot, I think what Josh Trank should have done is they should have made the Fantastic Four already the Fantastic Four from the beginning of the movie. Don't do an origin story. We've seen the origin story. Have them already the Fantastic Four, and then retell their origins through a series of flashbacks. Now, I'm not a big fan of flashbacks, but I like the way that Christopher Nolan did it in Batman Begins. It was a very non-linear storytelling, and while I'm not a big fan of that, it worked. Now, another way that they did it well was in Tim Burton's Batman, where he was already Batman, and then in the middle of the movie, he told the origins through a flashback. And it was a very, very brief origins, but it still made for a very great film because it helped move the story forward. It helped propel the story into a more quicker pace. It was paced very, very well because we didn't have to deal with the origin story all over again. It's very, very tedious to retell this story again and again and again after fans have already seen this 10 years ago. So I think that if they want to reboot it, the best thing that they could ever do is skip the origin story, which is what Marvel Studios is doing with Spider-Man. They're skipping the origin story because we've seen it twice already from 2 different directors. So now that they have it going on a 3rd time, skip the origin story. That's the right direction. Have the Fantastic Four, already the Fantastic Four, already doing their missions, already, saving the day. That will be exciting, and that will make for a more exciting and more fun Fantastic Four film. That is my suggestion to the studios. If you want to do it right, at least take this version as what you should be doing for the future of the films. I mean, if they were to reboot it at all. Anyways, that's all I gotta say in this video. I said a lot, and I don't want to say any more. I want to give the stage to you guys, and I want you guys to comment. Excuse me. I want you guys to comment on those suggestions. Here's your reminder. Number 1, give it to Marvel. Number 2, continue making the sequel as planned. Number 3, reboot it again after a few years. Number 4, jump into the X-Men Fantastic Four crossover. Or number 5, make it a TV series. Let me know in the comment section below what you think they should do, and also let me know how do you think they can make the Fantastic Four story told in the right way. How do you think they're going to do it justice? Let me know your thoughts down below. And as always, if you want to see more, hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation. Also follow me on Twitter at Ragin Nation. My name is Alex Yu. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace. And, his performance, I completely felt for his performance. I completely felt for Eazy-E. I was watching Eazy-E. I was watching him brought back to